Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang Bapak dan Ibu yang telah hadir di PPIM Seminar lantai 3 dan juga bergabung secara online di media sosial PPIM UIN Jakarta. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to our seminar. This is the 47th seminar in the PPIM Seminar Series. Today's discussion will be titled Humans, Nature, and God in Indonesia, Does Religion Matter? I would like to extend our gratitude for all participants who have come either offline here in PPIM or online through PPIM social media. Bapak dan Ibu boleh mengisi tempat yang masih terbuka di depan. Baik. Terima kasih. Bagi yang mengikuti PPIM seminar di ruang lantai 3 PPIM, telah disediakan snack dan juga buku terbitan PPIM UIN Jakarta di depan ruangan seminar PPIM. Terima kasih. So I am Aptiani, but I'm Aptiani or Yani. I'm one of the researchers here in PPIM UIN Jakarta. I would like to welcome Bapak Frans Wijsen for coming to this seminar as the guest speaker, as the main speaker for this seminar. In this session, we will discuss more on the issue of environment and religion, as the title says here, Humans, Nature, and God in Indonesia. Before we begin our seminar, I would like to introduce briefly who is our guest speaker today. Our theme today is to explore the role of religion in the context of escalating environmental crisis. Religion can have a significant and positive influence on people's behavior when it comes to environmental activism. Faith is fundamental, especially in Indonesia, to many Indonesian people's outlook on life. And religion also offers a powerful opportunity to inspire environmental action. We will learn more from our guest speaker and the discussant on whether religion matters on environmental issues in the context of Indonesia. I'm very pleased and honored to welcome two distinguished speakers to discuss more on this topic. First of all, let me introduce you our guest speaker, Bapak Frans Wijsen. Professor Emeritus Frans Wijsen served for many years in the Department of Empirical and Practical Religious Studies at Radboud University. He was once honored with the Distinguished Lifelong Academic Achievements Award of the African Academics Network. Since 2022, he has been an Adjunct Professor at the Graduate School of Universitas Gadjah Mada. At UGM, he teaches mostly in the PhD program in Interreligious Studies and the Master's Program of Religious and Cross-Cultural Studies. He directs a large-scale research project on humans and nature with several Indonesian scholars, including Bapak Zainal Abidin Bagir. He was once our guest speaker in the workshop for one of our projects, REACT, or Religious and Environmental Activism, here in PPIM. The large-scale survey of more than 1,000 respondents, if I'm not wrong, was delayed because of the COVID, but was completed in 2023. Is it correct? Yes. Okay, it is a comparative analysis of human and nature research that originated in the Netherlands and then was conducted in several other countries, including in Indonesia. Among the questions that he addressed in this research was whether religion matters when it comes to thinking about nature and how people should deal with it. Is there a difference between the Netherlands and Indonesia in this regard? And yeah, I'm sure we will discuss more in this issue later. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, langsung aja ya Bu ya. Please give a warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Bapak Frans Wijsen.
pleasure to share some of our research findings on human nature and God in Indonesia. Does religion matter? I'm aware that your institution has a new project on green Islam, so you can also ask the question, how green is Islam? I hope to address that question as well. In the sub-question is, of course, another question. What do we mean by religion? That is a complicated topic. I will not go into detail. But when I see this picture, one of my favorite pictures taken in Pasuruan, during the lunch we talked about it a lot. I see a lady, she's veiled. I assume she is religious. I don't know, because I didn't talk to her, but the veil for me could mean that she's religious. I just wonder what is going on in her mind. And she looks at this river. That is what fascinated us in our research, and I'm very happy that I can share some of the findings here, and I thank the organizers for inviting me. Next slide, please. We generate knowledge. Why do we generate knowledge? It's good to put our knowledge in a knowledge frame. I'm not going to talk at length because I'm sure that you are aware of most of the facts. Indonesia is the second or the third largest polluters in the world, depending on what you measure, how you measure. Do you measure in terms of plastic waste, in terms of greenhouse gas? I don't think I need to go into detail. Every hour in Indonesia you cut 18 football fields of forest, rainforest, or carbon absorbing capacity gone. Just one example. Another example, every hour you dump 6 tons of plastic in the ocean. Moreover, even worse, Padin, you import plastic waste from the Netherlands. Assuming that you will recycle it, but you don't recycle it, you just burn it. And that means toxic gases release, enormous cause of climate change. Indonesia is extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Also, I don't need to go into detail. Your city is sinking, Semarang is sinking, so that is obvious. Yet your country has the highest number of climate change deniers. That's so strange. Does religion play a role here? Could be. Indonesians are overwhelmingly religious. Here again, I don't go into statistics, but according to Poll or Gallup, 96 or 97% says it's religious. Of course, talking about religion in Indonesia is complicated because it could mean that you have something on your ID. Maybe it doesn't say something about what you really believe or convinced at. So, but in statistics, Indonesia is overwhelmingly religious. Many government and non-governmental organizations include religion and religious leaders in contributing to the climate change mitigation or adaptation. And some of them do. We have many good examples. On micro level, we can say, oh, Muhammadiyah is doing something, and who is doing something, and so on and so on. But what is the overall picture? That was something that we had in mind. The complexity with religion is what exactly do you talk about? Do you talk about belief? Do you talk about morality? Do you talk about spirituality? That's not always clear. But I think if you are acquainted with this debate, you see that religion can work in 2 ways. I just give one example. I guide a PhD student in Kendeng Mountains. She studies ecofeminism and eco-Islam. So basically involvement of women. Kartini Kendeng is a mix of indigenous belief and Muslim. But in the cement mining, there are Muslims who are in favor of cement mining, say public good, referring to Al Khalifa, and there are Muslims and both who are against, drawing on the same sources. So overall, the picture of religious involvement in environmentalism is not very clear. So that was also a reason why we wanted to do this research. So what we try to do in our HAN research, I'm not going to mention it again and again, so humans and nature research, is to explore faith-based responses, faith-based support for environmental ethics. Basically, that is what we want to do. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a picture taken from another research that I did in Citarum River in Bandung with another PhD student of mine. We see people cleaning a river. We see garbage there. I also see a lady wearing a headscarf. To what extent are these people inspired by their belief? That was a question that we had in mind. Now, next slide. So what I try to do, but I'm very optimistic because I'm given 40 minutes, huh? Okay, flexible. Okay, so I will try, I speak a little bit about the methods. Not all of you have a background in statistics, so I try to reduce that part. I speak about the results, so what we found in terms of correlations between religious practices, religious influences, and religious affiliations in relation to the so-called HAM scale. I will explain that later on. And then I think the most important part, and also for us most interesting, is our conclusions. And we just told, we finalized the research in 2022. We are now in 2024. It took us more than a year to interpret our data because our data were so unexpected that we simply didn't know how to make sense of it. But I will come back to that later. Next slide, please. Now the HAN scale, the Humans and Nature scale, is an instrument that was developed in my university, Radboud University. I then visited our university several times. And it was developed in the 1990s. At that time, Europe was confronted with the effect of climate change until today. River Rhine, floods. Last year, 2 years ago, even 300 people died, I think. So in the 1990s, we were confronted with floods, River Waal, near the place where I live, Nijmegen. And we realized that we have to do something. We know Dutch people are very good in water management. We build dikes. 1/3 of our country is below sea level. So we are very good in water management. But in the 1990s, we realized how long can we continue doing this, fighting against water, pushing water back. Water is stronger than we are. So there is a limit. So maybe we have to change our paradigm. We don't fight against water, but we collaborate with water. Just let the water flow. It was called the Room for River project, huge project. But it was dramatic because we had to displace people. Farms, houses, they had to be removed to give the river space. And we thought, okay, so there will be a massive protest against displacement. So we wanted to measure the public support for integral water management. I think when you passed the Waal, you saw the huge river works there, and it's very impressive what happened there. To our surprise, people supported. They were very supportive. They said, no, we really see we cannot continue just fighting against the water, and we really see something has to be done. Now, in the original HAN scale, Humans and Nature scale, we started from 4 philosophical images of humans in relation to nature, and then we operationalized those 4 images into statements. I don't want to make it too technical, but I can give you some examples. First image is the man include the women, of course. The man as master of nature, the exploiter of nature. That is the image that we expected. Europeans exploit nature and so on and so on, fine, for their own benefit. The human as the master of nature. The humans as the stewards of nature. Al-Khalifa idea, but also in the biblical sources, the Imago Dei idea, we guard, we protect, and so on. The human as a steward of nature, nature, the humans as a partner of nature. Humans and nature are equal, so they partner, and sometimes say nature is much stronger than we are. Some people say, no, humans are more stronger than nature and so on, but the idea that we have to collaborate with nature. And the fourth idea was humans as participant in nature. It is a bit silly that we say humans and nature, as if they are two entities. No, we are embedded in nature. Nature is in us, and we are in nature, so we cannot separate them. So these were the four images, and we operationalized them in a scale. Now, in the beginning, we had multiple choice questions. So we asked a question: Are you of the opinion that? And then we would ask: humans are above nature, or humans are part of nature? And then people could say yes or no. And we thought that is too simple, so we made a Likert scale, operationalizing those four images into statements. And people could agree with that statement in more agreement or less agreement. So they fully could agree, or neutral, or fully disagree and agree. I come back to that later on. So the instrument itself was more refined. We did this research in 20 countries, and the scale was really validated. That means we really measure what we want to measure. We are pretty sure of that. But this was never done in a Muslim country. This was never done in a Muslim country. So we wanted to know, okay, very long history, it's not so interesting, but I was involved, and so we wanted to know, do Muslims have a unique view? Would it be different what we find in Indonesia? Some scholars say, okay, Islam is different, or Muslims think differently about nature. So we were just interested, okay, do the Muslims show a quite different perspective on human nature interaction? So that was the knowledge guiding interest behind the humans and nature scale in Indonesia as we do it now. Next slide, please. So I said already, the Han scale, humans and nature scale, is a validated scale. It has 20 statements originally. Of course, it is developed in a Dutch, quite secular countries, although the original Han scale had some items that could be interpreted to be spiritual. For example, a statement was, when I walk through a forest, I experience something bigger than humankind. And we think bigger than humankind shows that I am not the center of the world, and we are not anthropocentric, but humans are embedded into a larger whole. We thought, okay, this is spiritual. Or I'm united with the universe. Of course, we did not speak about God or Allah, or because in the Dutch context that would not make sense. In Indonesia, my colleagues convinced me, yeah, but Indonesia is different in two ways. We are overwhelmingly religious, so we must put some religious statements there, and we are very vulnerable for the effects of climate change. So we must also include the images of nature as a threat. You know, we have tsunamis, we have volcanoes, we have earthquakes, and so nature as a threat. So that is what we did. In the Han scale in Indonesia has 40 items, not 20, but 40. So the original 20 items and 20 context-dependent items. What we did, we selected, next slide, please. Yeah, we selected 10 locations showing a qualitative representation. So we did not want a quantitative representation, because then, of course, the Muslims would be the vast majority. But we also wanted to hear the Buddhist voice, the Hindu voice, the indigenous voice, Confucianist voice. So in that sense, we wanted to have a large sample. So that's what we tried to do. So we had 5 locations in Java, Jakarta, Bandung, Surabaya, Semarang, and Yogyakarta. And outside Java, Aceh, Jambi, Bali, Samarinda, Kupang. So Kupang mostly Christian, of course. And we tried to find locations where there is a mixed population, Muslim, indigenous, and so on. And locations that are affected by natural disasters. Now in Yogyakarta, of course, we have Mount Merapi eruption and so on. So that was the idea behind our sample. And then we selected, we looked at age, we looked at gender, we looked at domicile, we looked at income, education, and so on. So we tried to make it as representative as possible in a qualitative way. So what we did, we employed 10 research assistants in the 10 locations. They were given, of course, or they had their computer program on their laptop. They did at least 100 face-to-face interviews where they used the hand scale. In addition, they had at least 10 in-depth interviews, open interviews with the respondents to see whether we can get some deeper insights into what people tell us. So that is basically what we did, and we measured, of course, what religion do people have? That is a tricky question in Indonesia, I realize, because mostly people just answer what they have on their ID. It does not necessarily say something about their belief. We also measured how important is religion in your life, so religious influence, and religious practices as how often do you pray, how often do you read scripture, and how often do you talk about religion at home. Remember this statement, how often do you talk about religion at home? Because that seems to me to make in our sample a difference. I will come back to that. Basically, I can tell a lot more, but basically that is enough information. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of our demographic characteristics, not very surprising, the majority are Muslims, about 50% women, 50% men. 60% come from urban locations. Most participants finished senior high school. So in that sense, it is not really representative because our sample is really more educated than the average population. Most respondents earn between 1.5 and 4.5 million rupiah. The respondents were, most of them young, the younger generation, and quite a large number is self-employed. 1/5 of the population was self-employed or employed by a company. Here again, I can go into details if you want the statistics. The article will be published soon. Next slide, please. In terms of religious affiliation, as I said already, about half, 57% were Muslim, 60%, and there were the four largest groups, the three largest groups besides Muslims were Protestants, 41%, Catholics 9.5%, and Hindus 9.5%. In our measurements, we only measured and compared those four groups because statistically we can say something significant about it. Later on, I will show the other groups like Confucianist, indigenous religions, Buddhist, and the findings are surprising, but we cannot make very significant statements about it statistically. What else can we say? When we look at age, now overall, all the respondents trend to report stronger influence of religion and decision making than the younger ones. I'm not sure if that is an indication of secularization in Indonesia. I will come back to that. Protestants and Catholics are relatively more likely to indicate that religion has a strong influence on their life. Very understandable, because minority groups always are more affected by religion. Older people tend to read more scriptures and more likely to pray daily at home than the younger ones. Again, that might show to kind of secularization, I don't know. Remember this one, Muslims are more likely to indicate discussing religious matters frequently at home than non-Muslims. This will come back in our statistics because this is the only variable that seems to make a significant impact. I will come back to that. But this is our population. Next slide. Yeah. So what we did, as I explained, we had 4 images. No, sorry, we had 6 images. We had the original 4, plus nature as a threat, plus the humans are dependent on nature. What we did, normally we have it's called a Likert scale, so we have a form, it has 40 statements, and people can agree or disagree to a certain statement, and then we measure what factors come out of the survey, and to what level do people agree with such a factor, and then we make a cross tabulation. Does it make any difference whether you are Muslim or Protestant or Catholic or whatever? Does it make any difference whether you practice a lot or whether religion has an influence on your life? So we measure those correlations between the variables. That is what we did. Now, in our survey, we found 4 factors. I'm not going to bother you too much how factor analysis works, but you cluster, not you, the computer program clusters statements that are most likely go together. So if I fully agree with one statement, most likely I will also fully agree with another statement, and I will disagree with another statement. By clustering those statements, you get factors, images of human nature interaction. Images. We had the first factor that included the ID of the factor 1. Sorry. Yeah. That is where our interpretation and our problem came from, the labels. We had one factor that clearly had the idea of we care for nature, we guard nature, we protect nature, we care for nature. Surprisingly, all the factors that we added, so all the religious statements, ended up in that factor. So we call it the religious steward. Al Khalifa Imago Dei, or however you call it. That is factor 1. Factor 2, we call it the humanist steward, had exactly the same idea. We care for nature, we protect nature, but surprisingly, none of the religious statements ended up in that factor. And that is what puzzled us. How come? How come that you have 2 images of human nature? One is religious, the other is secular. Of course, my colleagues fully disagreed with that separation, but yeah, you add factors that you call religious, they end up in one factor and not in the other factor. So I call that humanist or general or however you call it. But we cannot ignore that finding. That is something that puzzled us a lot. The third factor that we found was the master image. Now, not surprising. Not surprising. So humans are the leaders of nature. We can exploit nature for our own benefit because that's what God tells us to do. And of course, there were many religious statements there in that image. And the fourth image was indeed the participant image. We are embedded in nature. We are one with nature. So we called it the religious participants. We also saw some of the religious statements in that factor. Now let me set. For example, in factor 1 there was a question. There are higher powers to which humans are responsible about how they care for nature. Very complex. If you do the survey, I would simplify this type of question. But so here we didn't speak about God. We spoke about a higher power, but we had other, as God's creation, nature has its own rights to exist. So there were statements that explicitly spoke about God, Tuhan, not Allah. But there were other statements that spoke about higher beings or spiritual beings, and so on. But yeah, we found, we had several factor analysis. That means, yeah, let's say, of course you have an idea about what you find, but you don't want to find 4 factors. You can also find 3 factors or 8 factors, and that is in fact what we did. But this calculation was statistically most sound. That means we had almost all the statements were included. They ended up in some factor, and they showed a high internal coherence. That is also what you measure. Do those statements really go together? And the 4 factors really had a very high internal coherence. So there was no doubt about that. And also, that is something that we puzzled, but now I go into the debate already. How come that you have 2 ideas that are the same, stewardship, but one is secular, in my terms, and the other is religious? I would have expected there is only one stewardship factor. I mean, that was my assumption. But that did not happen. So in the minds of people, they separated. They separated, not we. They separated 2 factors. Okay, that is so far the factor analysis. Maybe you can move to the next slide. Yeah, this is an interesting figure. I don't bother you too much. So we were interested, okay, what about the Muslims, the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Hindus, because these were the larger groups. So we measured, totally disagree is -2, totally agree is 2, 0 is neutral. Yeah? And then you can simply measure. You have the 4 images, as I explained, and then you measure the support for it. Now, if you see, if you look at Muslims, for the religious steward, overall, if you look at the humanist steward, the religious steward has a lower agreement, a higher with the humanist steward. If you look overall at the religious steward, if you compare the Muslim, Protestant, Catholic, and Hindu, there is the lowest support for this type of image, although very high. Very high. But if you look at this statistics, you see that the religious master is supported most by Muslims. And that was very surprising to us. We didn't expect that because Al Khalifa ID and so on. But when you look at this statement, overall, most support is with the religious steward and the humanist steward. That's also strange, of course, because most of our respondents are religious. But they have the highest support for the humanist type of stewardship. It does not contrast with the religious steward, because there is high support for both types of stewards. When you look at the religious master, you see that the Muslims and Protestants are highest. Hindu are the lowest, of course, that is, you can expect that. When we look at the religious participant, we see the highest among, or high among Catholics and the high among Hindus. Now, how come that Muslims and Protestants go low on that attitude and Catholics and Hindus higher? Of course, we can make an interpretation about that, but that is what our factor analysis and the measuring of the agreement with that factors showed us. Our debate until now is how can you explain that all the items that we added, assuming that Indonesians are very religious, end up in 3 factors except 1, and that is the factor with the highest agreement. If you know the answer, please welcome. But that is the debate that we had. Next slide, please. I said already this is a different show. Here we include all the religious groups. Now I don't have the colors here. So the column to the left shows the overall population. You see Islam, Protestant, Catholic, Hindu. We included here Buddhist, Kepercayaan, and Confucianist, but we cannot make any statistical significant statement about it because they are simply too small. But yeah, not surprisingly, Buddhist and Kepercayaan, they reject the master ID. Yeah? But you see that Islam and Protestant have a quite high agreement with the master ID, although the highest with the secular or humanist stewardship ID. You see that overall, in all the religions, the idea of the stewardship, we call it the eco-friendly stewardship, I will explain that later, is the highest. And the religious is the second highest. And then far lower is the idea of master and participant. But if you compare Islam, Protestant with Catholic and Hindu, then you see that among Protestant and Islam, there is a higher support for the master ID than among the other religions. How you interpret that is of course a different issue. I speed up a little bit. We go to the next slide. Of course, we were interested in, okay, so overall, the religions seem to have more or less the same pattern, whether you are Buddhist or Hindu or Catholic or Protestant. Most of us support the idea of stewardship. Also the Kepercayaan, where we did not expect it. Okay, so that doesn't make a lot different. But does the influence of religion make a difference? So people who said, for example, religion has a big influence on my daily life, religion plays an important role on my decision making, and so on and so on. Does it make any difference in the way people support the images? Here we see that overall people support factor 1, factor 2, and factor 3. So the religious type of steward, the humanist steward, the religious master, but not the religious participant. That is something that we find overall. There is very low agreement with the religious participant ID, and the more religious you are, the more the lower agreement with that ID. So seemingly when you are very religious, seemingly the idea that God, humans, and nature are one, maybe you can say that is kind of Sufism ID, that has very low agreement. You said that we do the research in the Netherlands. Surprisingly, that is not the topic of my talk now. Surprisingly, in a secular country like the Netherlands, that was the factor that scored highest. So spiritual, kind of spiritual, embedded in a cosmic whole and so on. Not in Indonesia, very religious, but in a secular country, that was the factor that scored high in the Netherlands. Okay, next slide, please. Now, does practicing religion make a difference? We asked, how often do you read the scripture, Bible, Quran? How often do you pray, for example? And how often do you speak about religion at home? Now, I just try to summarize what is there. The more respondents read scriptures and pray daily, the higher their agreement with the religious and the humanist steward and the religious master. It is not surprising because that is the overall pattern that we found. And they think lower agreement with the religious participants, and that is the overall pattern. There is a significant correlation. I'm not going to bother you with how we measure significance in statistical terms. There is a significant correlation between talking about religious matters at home and the religious master. That means the more respondents talk about religion, the higher their agreement with this factor. That is something that puzzles us, and we try to make sense. And you see, I tend to think, okay, you pray, that is a daily routine. You know, you don't need to be very religious to pray because that is a social ritual, even for reading scriptures. But talking about religion at home, that shows some religious commitment. And seemingly, so there is a significant correlation between talking about religion at home and the masters. So seemingly, the more you talk about religion at home, the higher support for that factor. And surprising or not, it is more Muslims and Protestants who talk more about religion at home. And also we find more support for that master idea among Muslims and Protestants. Overall, massive support for the religious steward. So when we really look at the differences, these differences are small but significant. Overall, that is the pattern that I want to communicate with you. Next slide, please. Now, I don't go too deep into the statistical part, but we just leave it like that. Next slide, please. Next slide, I think. Yeah. So here we see the significant, a summary of the significant positive and negative correlations. You see the negative correlations are all with the religious participant. So that is something that really doesn't go together with being religious. And overall support for the religious ecocentric steward, secular ecocentric steward, a religious master, and negative for the religious participant. Why we call it eco-friendly steward? Maybe that needs some explanation. In the original Hand scale, as I said in the beginning, we had the master, the steward, the partner, and the participant. Originally, we thought, okay, the master and the steward, they are anthropocentric. You know, in the Al-Khalifa idea, it is the human that cares about, and the master, it's the human who cares. So these are anthropocentric views, and the others are non-anthropocentric. What we discovered in the stewardship idea is that they are less anthropocentric. Put it differently, the stewardship idea that we found is much more eco-friendly or nature-friendly and less anthropocentric. So that did not correspond with our original idea. That is why we systematically call it ecocentric steward. So not the steward that guard, it's the humans who protect, the humans who care, and so on, but more embedded in nature. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, you can say, yeah, that is all nice. That is all the images. Yeah, we did not study the practices. We had a debate at lunchtime. I did some case studies. I'm fascinated by plastic. Maybe a topic for next time. But yeah, there is not a direct relation between what people say or what people think and their behavior. That is also something that we have to take into account in qualitative research. What I show here is comes from another research. I spoke about it during lunch. I did a small-scale research in Pasuruan. I visited pesantren. Now, on the one hand, they say religion is based on cleanliness, and the same pesantren produces 100,000 bottles per day in plastic. So, and who has a fatwa against plastic? Plastic is makruh. But at the same time, 7 pesantren in Pasuruan produce millions of bottles. How can you explain? I mean, that is not the topic of today, but that is simply to show the limitation of our research is we only measured images. We did not measure how the images go together with practices. So that is the limitation. Conclusions. Next slide. Yeah, the good news, there is not much difference between religious groups. That means also religious groups can work together because we really have all the same idea about how humans relate to nature. Muslims and Protestants have a slightly higher agreement with the master models than Catholics and Hindus. We thought about how come We thought maybe Muslims and Muslims and Protestants are a bit more rational. Catholics and Hindus are a bit more ritual. That could be, we don't have an explanation for it. That is our finding. Despite the fact that the respondents combine the images, so if you are in favor of one image, it doesn't mean that you are against the other, except the religious participants. People can combine images. So they are fluid, they are combined, yet they make a clear distinction between the humanist and the religious. However you call it. You know, Pazijn was here. I had endless debates with Pazijn how to label that and how to interpret that. But we cannot do away with the fact that in the minds of the people there is a distinction between two types of stewardship. Whereas I had expected, there is only one stewardship model and the religious items will be there. But seemingly it was not. And that was the factor that got the highest agreement. How can you explain? I don't know. Maybe you have the answer. A religious influence does not make a big difference. The more influence, so the more people say religion plays a role in my life, the higher agreement with the religious and the humanist steward, as well as with the master, not with the participant. So that is really something that is outside the religious mindset, at least according to our statistics. A religious practice does seem to make a difference. People who talk more about religion at home have a significant higher agreement with the religious master. Overall, very small difference, because overall it is the support for the stewardship. But if you really look at the details, we see a slightly higher agreement with the master idea among people who talk about religion at home, possibly because they are more committed to religion. That is also an assumption. Discussion. How to make sense of that? My interpretation, if you ask Pazijn, he will have a different interpretation. My interpretation, and that is the interpretation that we give all over the world. We did it in Canada, we did it in the United States, we did it in Vietnam, we did it in Africa. My assumption, people react to nature primarily as a human being. Not as Muslim, not as a Dutch or Indonesian, or simply as a human being. I see rubbish and I know this is not okay. Not because I'm a Muslim. Being a Muslim may help that, may strengthen that. And that is what we find. I had another research. There were women engaged in waste management. And all those women said in the interviews, we became aware this is not okay. As women. And later on we realized, but this is exactly what Islam tells us. So Islam strengthens a certain conviction. But it is not Islam that was the reason for, okay, we have to do something about it. So that would be my simple answer to the question, why is the humanist steward higher than the religious? Because primarily we relate to nature as a human being. Not because I'm born somewhere or because I have a certain belief. That is my interpretation. If you ask Zijn, he will give another and of course, as I said already, the humanist and the religious responses do not exclude each other. It's not when you are a humanist, you are against religion, or religion against you. No. We combine those two images. The problem is, this is a large-scale survey, 1100 plus interview. Of course, when we go into qualitative studies, we can show, oh, but NU does this, and Muhammadiyah does that, and we find always good practices. And they say, oh, but faith is very much involved, and so on and so on. And then it's good that we have those studies. This is an overall study, and that shows a little bit different picture. And the good news is, I started with my own university. We were confronted with the effects of climate change in the 1990s in my town, Nijmegen. There were floods. We realized we cannot continue doing river management as we did it for the past 50, 60 years, fighting against water, building higher dikes. Simply, that is not the way forward. So we just let the river flow, and people had to be displaced from their homeland. So we thought, oh, there will be massive protests again, and there was not. people understood. So we said, oh, people are nature friendly, and that was our surprise. Yeah, we find the same in Indonesia. There is a massive support for eco-friendly stewardship. The complexities, and I go back to the beginning, how come that Indonesia is among the top polluters in the world? So how can you explain the gap between what people think, what people believe, and the practices that all of us can see in our daily life? Next slide. This is the HAN team. This is what I had to say. I look forward to the discussion and maybe interpretations that we did not think about. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening discussion on human nature and God Indonesia, does religion matter? Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm applause for Mr. Frans. Izinkan saya memberikan summary ya atas apa yang tadi telah disampaikan. Bapak dan Ibu juga para peserta diharapkan untuk mengisi daftar hadir yang tadi sudah disediakan di depan. Kemudian di depan ruangan juga ada snack ya untuk para peserta yang hadir secara offline di lantai 3 seminar PPIM. Baik, latar belakang dari penelitian ini adalah tadi Indonesia dipilih karena memang ada kontradiksi yang lumayan jelas ya bagaimana orang Indonesia itu sangat religius, tapi kemudian di dalam praktiknya Indonesia itu adalah the third or the second largest pollutant gitu ya tadi ya. Di Indonesia juga padahal sangat vulnerable atau sangat mudah atau terdampak pada isu-isu krisis lingkungan. Tapi kemudian Indonesia masyarakatnya malah menjadi orang-orang yang sangat denial gitu ya, atau mengingkari adanya perubahan iklim atau krisis yang terjadi karena lingkungan. Seperti itu. Kemudian HAN ini sebenarnya sudah teruji di 22 negara, tapi belum pernah diujikan di negara muslim, makanya di Indonesia juga dipilih. Kemudian untuk lebih bisa menjawab konteks yang lokal berada di Indonesia itu ditambahkan dari 20 pertanyaan aslinya dari negara-negara di Eropa, kemudian 20 negara lainnya itu di Indonesia itu ditambahkan 20 pertanyaan lagi, jadi ada 40 pertanyaan yang ada di Indonesia. Kemudian hasilnya seperti yang tadi kita lihat bersama-sama dikelompokkan menjadi 4 ya. Yang pertama ada secara umum semua responden yang menjadi objek penelitian dalam survei ini tidak memiliki perbedaan yang signifikan ya Bu ya. Semuanya masuk menyetujui pada 3 faktor, terutama faktor yang pertama adalah religious steward, kemudian ada humanist steward, dan religious master. Tapi yang keempat ini agak berbeda. Di religious participant itu tidak terlalu banyak tingkat agreementnya gitu ya. Secara umum tidak banyak perbedaan antar agama, tetapi Muslim dan juga Protestan itu lebih masuk kepada master model seperti itu. Mungkin itu yang bisa saya sampaikan summary-nya dari apa yang tadi telah disampaikan oleh Bapak Frans. Kemudian kita bisa masuk ke sesi berikutnya, yaitu sesi dari Ibu Iim Halimatus Sa'diyah. Bu Iim adalah PPIM Director of Research and a lecturer at UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, a professor too at FISIP. She completed her doctoral education in sociology at Iowa State University. After previously taking a master's degree in University of Birmingham and the interdisciplinary Islamic Studies program at UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, she has also written several notable publications such as books, journal articles, and others. And today she will discuss on this topic more. Bu Iim, saya stop share dulu. Setelah ini kita bisa mendengarkan Bu Iim menjelaskan lebih banyak terkait atau kemudian mendiskusikan juga apa yang tadi telah disampaikan oleh Pak Frans. Silakan Bu Iim.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih Yani. Thank you so much Pak Frans. I call you Pak Frans, is that okay? Thank you so much Pak Frans for coming today. It's a very honor for us, PPIM, to have you here and discuss your research. And for these presentations, I would like to talk to main things. The first one is like, I just want to respond a little bit about your research, and then I want to talk a little bit more on PPIM previous research. A small research, I mean, this is not the main research, but we can include several questions on environment, and I think it's also interesting to share and to combine with your research finding. So my title is on Indonesian Muslim pro-environmental behavior, does religion matters? So in terms of responding to your research, I would like to highlight that in addition to human and nature that you Netherlands developed and you already implemented in several countries, there are also several different measures on human and nature relationships, such as new ecological paradigm scale or connected to nature scale, and there are some other measure or scale as well. But what is missing from this measurement? Even though you mentioned that human and nature scales also include the spiritual God or religion in terms of, you know, greater being, it's referred to God, but more on the spiritual aspect. But we could see that, like the example here in the table one, I showed the example of how connected to nature scale measure. So most of the indicator or the questions in this scale focus more on human and natures. So God or religion in this measure mostly are missing. Because my argument, because maybe these measures are developed in quote-unquote secular Western context in which religion maybe is not as visible as Indonesia, as you mentioned, even though it's like in ID, it's also representing religious. It could be debatable, but my reason is because this measure developed in more secular and more Western contracts. Oops, okay. And then what I see from your research with scholars in UGM is that you mentioned that you adding the God, because the reason is because Indonesia, statistically, it's still debatable, but statistically, Indonesia is religious people, so that's why it's important to adding God, and religion also plays very important role in Indonesian society. So that's why you adding, you and your scholar adding God in your measurement. So if I want to like picture this into like a triangle of like, you know, human representing anthropocentrism, and then nature ecocentrism, and you adding God as theocentrism. So I think this is the added something that's different from Han scale developed in other country with your scale in the context of Indonesia by adding religion and God's role in your measurement. But then I think although it's already capturing three different aspects of God, human, and natures, Hani, we call it Hani, I don't know how to pronounce it, Hani, right? Indonesia, human and nature in Indonesia cannot capture the individual's behavior, because your measurement emphasis more on the perception, right? The perceptions of individual or attitude of individual on how the relationship between human and nature should be. Whether you mentioned before should be stewardship or mastery or participant, but this more on perception and attitude. And also you also mentioned that this is not nationally represented, so we need to like retest this, whether your finding will be different if your measurement measure nationally representations of this country. Because maybe the perception of more educated people with different high level of education might be different, or people with different ethnic or socio-economic background will be different. So started from this, my next question is, how about the behavior? So in my next presentation, I would like to emphasize on the term pro-environmental behavior, which can be defined as any behavior intended by the individual to have a positive impact on the environment. And based on literature, PEB, or pro-environmental behavior, can be divided into private level and public level. Private is like you reuse things, recycling something, you try to save the electricity, something that you do to save the environment, but you do it individually, for your individually. But the public is more on, the scale is bigger. Like you join the activism, you donate for the environmental campaign, for environmental actions. It's more on a public levels. So with this question, then I would like to bring to PPIM's research before, even though it's still debatable, that it's statistically that Indonesian is very religious, because like Pew Research Center survey in 2017 shows that Indonesian who says religion is very important in their lives is 93%. But it's also interesting, in our previous study on religion, how religious young people, you mentioned whether the older people, it seems more religious rather than the younger people. That's also the finding of our previous studies. So there is like changes in the society and differences between generations. But we can say 90% of Indonesian Muslims are religious. Indonesian are religious. And if we want to looking at the relationship between religion and environment, there are several literature mentioned that religion can encourage environmental activism or shape public attitude as well as behavior toward environment. And also religion can be a force of collective action, unity, and political mobilization. Also, religion shape the believers' moral values, attitude, and how they should interact with the natures. But then my question is, under what condition does religion matters for Indonesian Muslim pro-environmental behavior? This is the main question in this presentation. So I use several literature and framework. In this case, I use value belief norm theory, which consider that personal value norms and belief affect individuals' pro-environmental behavior. And also religion creates social norm, guide personal behavior, and the basis for social structures, ethic, and laws. But the problem is, humans' interpretation to religious value is not singular. There are multiple interpretations of religion. Like in this case, I want to highlight two different religious views or values. Like in the context of Islam, there are two different views. We call it Jabariyah and Qadariyah. Padidin, you can add this. But Jabariyah is more like focusing on the power of God, the power of religion, the power of God in determining what happened in this world. But Qadariyah is more like human has the power, has the opportunity to change the takdir, the conditions. So how the Muslim interpret or belong to which value would this affect their behavior to environment? So, and also in terms of religiosity, many studies also have been conducted on this, but sure, the finding is mixed. Some said there is no relationship between religiosity and environmentalism or pro-environment, and also some study even show a negative correlation. Those who are religious, who are more religious, tend to be less progressive to the environment, less even conducted construction, destruction to the environment. Or some other study even says, yeah, religion can be a substantial empirical evidence that support that the notion of religion is predisposes individual act in environmentally responsible way. So because of this mixed finding, I want to highlight that, again, religiosity is not single as well. There are different dimensions and aspects of religiosity. Maybe we should like looking closer to different dimensions of religiosity. So come to the data. So PPIM has conducted a national survey in 2020. So the survey basically also funded by the Netherlands Embassy, but the focus is not on environment. At the time, it's focused on media and religious trend. But we add few questions because we need to want to know a little bit. So add few questions in the space that available in our survey on environment. So the survey is stratified random sampling into like nationally representative of Indonesia. It covers 1,240 Muslim. So our respondents is only Muslim. And for this analysis, I use OLS regression, but I included several variables like religious variable, like the view or religious value, whether people consider themselves as Qadariyah or Jabariyah, or in terms of environmental issues, we can divide it how people see natural disaster and how they see the climate change, whether it's because of human causes, because of natural causes, or because of the spiritual or religious causes. So that's the proxy to measure Qadariyah or Jabariyah view. And also in terms of religiosity, we include self-assessment of religiosity, affiliation with Islamic tradition, and also religiosity in terms of ritual. And also we include socio-demographic variables and socio-economic. I would like to start with the first finding on the one that I mentioned, Jabariyah and Qadariyah. These are some of the questions we asked to the respondent, whether they see that natural disasters is human causes, because human not protecting the natures, or because disasters happen because of it's natural cycles, or it's God punishment because of the human being's sins, or climate change. We also phrase in different question to emphasize, but in the context of a climate change, whether it's because of human not taking care of the nature, and also for the global warming, we ask whether it's heat of the hell because of the human sins. So that's why global warming is happening. And you could see here, if everyone, the red line, if they pass this line, means significant. The finding here shows that those who consider that natural disasters or climate change are due to human causes, or they consider that human has a play roles in the destruction of environment, they are more likely to be more pro-environmental behaviors. It means, it implies that if they consider that human has contributions to the destruction, so they will consider, they would like to participate to try to be more environmentally friendly. And the opposite, when individuals see natural disaster as natural cycle, it's natural. So human cannot do anything, right? Ini sudah alami lah, pokoknya itu terjadi, jadi nggak ada intervensi manusia. So this individual are more likely to be less pro-environmental behavior. And also in terms of disaster, God punishment of human misdeed, and also but the last one on the heat of the hell is not significant, jadi ini nggak masuk. But those two highlight that those who consider, who hold more Qadariyah view, that human has a contribution to the destruction, they are more likely to be more pro-environmental behavior. They want to engage, to participate in reducing the negative impact of what they did. But if they consider it's a God, it's takdir dari sananya, tidak ada yang bisa dilakukan, they don't to be more pro-environmental behavior. This analysis only include Jabariyah and Qadariyah perspective. However, when I adding several other variables, the finding is slightly different. But the one that's still significant is on this one. So if they if they consider that climate change or the destruction is because of humans did, they are more likely to be more pro-environmental behavior. Means there is sense of responsibility that they want to taking care of the earth if they consider this is, something that can be changed. It's not, God predisposition that you could do anything. But only that one, but not the Jabariyah. And then in terms of religiosity, I also find those who have higher level of religiosity in terms of ritual. So I would like to a little bit explain here. Those who have a higher level of ritual, more likely to have more pro-environmental behavior. But after I break down the ritual here, so I combine between obligatory and non-obligatory. Like we have like Sholat 5 waktu, 5 days, but we also have like sunnah. The sunnah one, non-mandatory one, it's more significant rather than the obligatory one. What is the interpretation of this is, for those who want to do sunnah, they need more commitment to do it. Ya, wajib mah, memang harus kewajiban, it's obligatory. But for sunnah, you need more effort, more commitment. And also, it's the same with the doing good for the environment. You need more commitment to do it. So that's why the ritual in terms of like non-mandatory ritual, those who practice non-mandatory ritual more, they are more likely to be more environmentally friendly. That's in terms of religiosity. Self-assessment of religiosity, no significant impact. In terms of belonging, Islamic traditions, it's also, I think, quite confirming your findings. In our findings here, compared to those who belong to other Islamic traditions, not Muhammadiyah, not NU, they are more like, this one, Muhammadiyah are more likely pro-environmentally friendly compared to NU, but compared to other religion. And also those who do not affiliate to any Islamic tradition, mean they're more secular. So those who are more secular, Muslim, but they do not belong to any certain Islamic tradition, whether NU or Muhammadiyah, they are more likely to be pro-environmental behavior, and also Muhammadiyah. In the context Muhammadiyah, they have more structures, how do you say it? It's like Catholic, right? In terms of institution, if they have centralized, if they have like instruction from the top, it will be distributed on the local level. It's quite different with NU. So that's why here the finding shows Muhammadiyah and those who secular one are more likely to be pro-environmental. And again, in terms of gender, the finding is very significant. Female. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that for the pro-environmental behavior in this analysis is focused more on private levels. It's also the limitation of this study because did not address the public level. In our upcoming survey, we will include both. So this one is more focused on how people recycling, saving the electricity, using reusable plastic bags, something like that. It's more private level. In this case, women are more likely to be more pro-environmental behavior. Why? Women are, I argue on this finding that gender socializations play a role. Those who taking care, waste in the household, oftenly women. So that's why in this case, women are more pro-environmental behavior. So gender socialization play a role. Marital status has no significant impacts. Ethnic. This one, we only compare between Japanese and non-Japanese. In this case, Japanese is more environmentally more eco-friendly than non-Japanese. In terms of education matters in this case. Those who have higher level of education are more likely to be pro-environmental behavior than those who have a lower level of educations, but not the income. So this is some of the findings from the previous research of PPIM. And to conclude, I just want to highlight, I don't know, it may be slightly different, but I would say that religion does matter, but the effect different on certain conditions that I mentioned before. Because like I show you the finding, everyone, that those who hold different religious values might have different behavior on the environment, whether they Jabariyah, Qadariyah, they will have different behavior. And also type of religiosity also different. If there's only implementing like obligatory, of course, obligatory is also need a commitment, but to do sunnah need more commitment. So those who have more commitment in practicing their religions, they are more likely to be more eco or pro-environmental, have high level of pro-environmental behavior. I think that's conclude my presentation. Thank you. I give it back to Yani.
Thank you. Please give a warm of applause for Ibu Iim Harimato Sa'dia. Once more, thank you Bu Iim sudah memberikan gambaran pembahasan akan Hanskel yang tadi telah disampaikan oleh Pak Frans. Pada intinya menurut Bu Iim ada beberapa hal yang perlu menjadi catatan bagi Hanskel atau riset Hanskel di Indonesia. Yang pertama adalah Hanskel sendiri itu dikembangkan di negara-negara Eropa yang pada umumnya adalah sekuler dan berbeda konteksnya dengan Indonesia yang sangat religius masyarakatnya menurut survei dan juga menurut pandangan masyarakat pada umumnya. Kemudian juga level pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang diajukan di Hanskel itu lebih pada persepsi saja dibandingkan kemudian masuk ke dalam perilaku masyarakat, terutama perilaku keseharian masyarakat, apakah sudah masuk ke pro-environmental behavior atau belum, seperti itu. Kemudian Bu Iim juga tadi menyampaikan hasil-hasil riset yang telah dilakukan oleh PPIM. Sebelumnya PPIM memiliki sebuah proyek yang berjudul Media and Religious Trend in Indonesia yang dibiayai atau didonori oleh pemerintah Belanda melalui kedutaan Belanda. Dalam penelitian ini kemudian ditemukan salah satunya beberapa pertanyaan memang diajukan terkait dengan lingkungan. Temuannya adalah agama itu berpengaruh dalam perilaku lingkungan atau perilaku pro lingkungan masyarakat Indonesia, terutama ketika dilihat pada level apa Bu, Jabariyah apa Qadariyah berarti? Qadariyah ya. Qadariyah Jabariyah. Mohon maaf. Intinya ketika melihat bahwa misalnya apa yang terjadi di lingkungan itu ada memang manusia itu memiliki andil dalam apa yang terjadi di lingkungan gitu. Nah, itu maka akan berpengaruh, mereka akan lebih pro lingkungan dibandingkan misalnya orang-orang yang melihat bahwa manusia itu tidak terlalu berpengaruh pada apa yang terjadi di lingkungan, tapi Tuhan mungkin misalnya itu yang lebih berpengaruh, maka mereka tidak memiliki perilaku pro lingkungan seperti itu. Yang kedua adalah ketika kita melihat religiusitas seseorang, ketika dia religius terutama pada ritual yang bersifat sunnah gitu ya, maka mereka akan lebih pro lingkungan. Nah, ini adalah hal-hal yang kemudian ditambahkan oleh Bu Iim yang bisa melengkapi temuan dari Bapak Frans dari Hanskel tersebut yang menurut Bu Iim masih berada pada level persepsi. Baik, terima kasih Bu Iim sekali lagi. Selanjutnya mungkin kami membuka pertanyaan. We are open for any questions from the audience, whether it is from online or offline audience. Yes, we have one person who wants to ask. Yeah, please, Mas. Yeah, we have a speaker who wants to ask, and also for our online audiences, please type your questions on the chat box on the Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Alvan from Print. My question is, who is more destruction to the nature and environment between religious society or secular society? That's all. Makasih. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak.
That is a difficult question. That is a very difficult question. I just first comment on what you said. The reason the original Hans scale indeed did not have direct references to God. That was not because of a bias. But that was simply because the statements are complex. For example, if I look at our own measurement, as God's creature, nature has its own right to exist. In fact, you measure two things, namely creation is God's creation, that is one, and then it has its own right to exist. When people agree or disagree to that statement, you don't know exactly what do they agree with. That creation is God's, or that we should care for it. That is why we, for the sake, not because of a bias, but because of the sake of validity of those questions, that we say, yeah, maybe better not ask those questions. However, in the Vietnam case, there is one Han research in Vietnam. They added some statements inspired by Buddhism. The overall score is not much different. So even if you include more religious items, as we did, as the Vietnam case, there is one other in Canada. One of the early Han scales in Canada included religion. Overall, doesn't make much difference. By the way, I don't want to say that religion does not matter, because religion does matter.
Yep.
It strengthens.
Yep, that's right.
It strengthens certain attitudes. Yeah? So that's what. Yeah, your question. From our data, I cannot support, but there is an interesting. Not to defend our research. There is an interesting research. Maybe you know it. Done by the Washington State University. It is about, you know it, the Islamicity Index. They measure simply what are the Islamic values, yeah, Islamic values, and where are they practiced most. That is what they measure. Do you know what the top Islamic countries are on the list? Sweden, Denmark, Scandinavia, Belanda, Indonesia is in the middle, Saudi Arabia is in the middle. Yeah, as you say, it is not so easy to see a direct correlation between religion and environmental behavior, but yeah, we see very secular. I would not call my country a secular country. You may say whatever you like about the Netherlands, but I think it's very spiritual. Our statistics shows it. I mean, that was our surprise. That in the 1990s, we thought, okay, we will find a high master ID. We can exploit nature, but find nature. To our own surprise, we found that there was massive support for the participant ID. We are embedded in a cosmic whole, we don't call it God or whatever. But definitely a spiritual value. And people supported that type of eco-friendly behavior. So it is not a direct answer to your question, maybe an indirect answer. You can debate this index done by the Chicago, by Washington State University, but it shows something. For me, but then I leave my whole Han research and I go to my very first PhD student that I supervised doing the research on Citarum. I show the picture in the beginning. We were interested, we had a whole team. We had 8 PhD students working on Citarum. I supervised the person who was interested in see how faith and environmentalism goes together. We started from the idea, in Islam, everything is about purity. Purity. That's the key idea in Islam. Yeah? The river is polluted. Now, how do purity and I mean, how can I explain that Indonesia is the most religious country, one of the most. By the way, I have my doubts about the statistics, but that is another issue. Then how do you combine that, highly religious and highly one of the top polluters in the world? That doesn't go together. Now, in that research, and that is very much what I think, although I'm not sure if I think I know what Jabariya and Qadariya means. But in that research, 4 years research of that lady, we didn't find much support from religious leaders or religious people for cleaning up the river. They said, yeah, you know, the waste in Citarum River. Yeah, that is not our concern. That is the government. You know, that's not. We deal with spiritual affairs. That is the government. They also blamed, you know, that is the industry. 70% of the waste in Citarum River is household based. That is simply you and me throwing rubbish into the river. The only connection that we found between purity in Islam and purification was among activists and among artists, not among the ordinary people. They simply say, no, religion has nothing to do with Citarum River. So from that perspective, yeah, being more religious doesn't need necessarily to higher commitment in eco-friendly behavior. I would even say there are some as in our response, I think you find slightly different, but overall, the people in our survey support eco-friendly behavior. Overall, if you look at the very small differences, those people who tend to say that they are more religious, measured by that one item that really had a very high significant impact. Speaking at religion at home, I think you would compare that with your sunnah. It takes more commitment. Yes. Praying at home, that's just a ritual. You do it, and you don't need to be very religious for it. But speaking about religion at home, that really shows some commitment. There was a very positive correlation between speaking about religion at home and support for the master. So not for the steward ID. That was something that surprised us. Yeah, I mean, that is what statistics tell us. Yeah, how you interpret that is a different issue. So yeah, that is what I can tell on the basis of my survey and other researchers. And of course, I think I mentioned that already. Yeah, another lady that I supervise in Kendang Mountains. Yeah, the complexity is of course that you have NU members there. One camp is in favor of cement mining, basing itself on the Al Khalifa ID, and the other NU group is against cement mining, basing itself on. So that makes it complicated. That also shows the ambiguity of religion. And then measured at micro, meso, macro level.
Bu Im, ada yang mau ditambahkan dari pertanyaan tersebut? Baik, tadi ada pertanyaan terkait mana yang lebih punya pengaruh buruk pada lingkungan gitu ya, apakah masyarakat yang kemudian sekular ataupun yang agamis gitu. Tidak ada menjawab secara langsung, tapi pada intinya mengutip, ya ada ambiguitas di situ, bahwa mengutip dari Washington State University ada Islamicity Index di sana mengukur negara-negara dari lingkungan perilaku lingkungannya seperti apa, kemudian malahan yang ditemukan negara-negara teratas dalam yang menurut atau mengikuti nilai-nilai yang terkandung dalam Islam pada umumnya, malahan bukan negara-negara yang memang teridentifikasi sebagai negara Islam seperti itu. Jadi memang ada hal-hal yang ambigu di luar kuasa kita. Baik, is there any more questions from audience, please? Ya, Pak Dadi dulu, kemudian Bu Haula. Anyone is fine. Yeah, Pak Dadi, please.
Thank you very much, Pak Frans, for your wonderful presentation, and I think it has enriched us in many different ways of understanding religion and environment. But I have been thinking about something else when you both Ibu Iim and you presented today. One is that religion or God, human, and nature on the other side of the world. How important is something like policy here or government regulations in our discussion about religion and environment. I believe Indonesia has gone through, in the past 50 years or maybe more, rapid industrialization, tremendous population growth, and in that case, of course, urbanization, which in many ways have major impacts in people's lives, including, you know, the level or the total of pollution, waste, and something like that. So rather than posing a question about does religion matter, maybe is it also something to consider, to ask something like why in major or in countries where Muslim or religious-minded people are the majority, they have the higher pollution than other communities. That is number one. Number two is whether a question like this, what are the underlying factors? What are the other factors that contribute to people's behavior? Whether it is a lack of commitment, something from spiritual, religious, cultural, things like that, or it is simply a lack of a commitment from the government to actually educate, and lack of the efficient management in waste and pollution and things like that. So that way, I think we will have a more a broader understanding of the complex issues, rather than questioning this, because of course, in countries like in the Scandinavian countries, where I don't know the level of spirituality or religion, there is maybe God doesn't exist anymore in most of the people's houses, but the commitment to environmental issues are very, very high. Thank you.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you. That is what we said. We measure a macro level, we measure a meso level, we measure a macro level. We did not measure macro level. But absolutely, I can give you many examples. It has to do with policy. It has to do with legislation. I can give you many good examples of that. So fully agree with that. But it is complicated, but more complicated. Indeed, you can blame your government. Yeah? But in your government are also NU and Muhammadiyah members. In your government are religious people, but seemingly at that level, religion plays no role at all. That is one as an outsider, one of the complexities. Of course, I can see very, very human friendly and so on and so on. But your government is highly influenced, but exactly the same people who say that they hold religious beliefs, and seemingly those religious beliefs have no impact on their policy making. Yeah? That is a complexity that we have to, and of course there are many more issues there. We have, as you mentioned, commercialization, industrialization, multinational, as I said already, going back to my plastic example, you not only produce a lot of plastic, but you import plastic from my country. Yeah? That is a complex. Secondly, I don't blame people. Let me really go to the grassroots. I have a small yayasan. We educate very small children in a very remote area. And so the professor of Gadjah Mada University, every other Sunday I take children and collect plastic bottles. In the Netherlands, for those of you, we have a movement, have people simply every Sunday collecting waste. I do the same, and then people think, oh, this mister from Jogja is crazy. But now people do understand. If you realize So the children talk to the parents, the parents talk to the RT. So you really see change, the thing change. But you realize that, those women, a lot of plastic rubbish, but there is no waste system. So what can you do? Yeah, you burn, or you put it in the ground, because the whole infrastructure is not there. That is something that your government has to be blamed on. I gave the example during the live. A lot can be done. The government in Bali bans plastic bags, banned the PET flashes, so PET bottles, not allowed. So legislation, you can do a lot. You have a tax system. The government can put tax. We have bottles 100% degradable within 3 months. Why don't we use that? That is simply because plastic is cheap, because there's almost no tax on it. But if your government just puts more tax on one bottle and less tax on the other bottle, the whole economy changes, but your government doesn't do that. And my question is that, in that macro level, there are all people who at the micro level go to the mosque. That is the complexity. But you're fully right, it is about policy, it is about legislation. Sorry, maybe you want to respond.
Yeah. Can I say it in Indonesia?
Sure.
Yeah. I will say it in English later on.
No.
Kalau bicara masalah lingkungan itu kan isu kompleks ya Pak. Tentu saja cara menanganinya tidak bisa tunggal. Tidak bisa we could not only rely on individuals. We need policy maker, government also take responsibility. But again, our research is more on micro level. Studi kami memang fokusnya pada individual. Unit analisisnya individu, jadi yang kita capture adalah individual behavior or attitude. But yeah, we do agree that to taking care of the environment need everyone's responsibility. For example, I want to mention the survey from Indicator on youth, anak muda. The question is, who are those who responsible for reducing the impact of climate change? And most of the respondents says everyone. It's everyone's responsibility, those individuals, the government, stakeholder, policymakers. But why? They don't do that. That's why our study is more focused on the value. What types of value that hindered or encouraged or strengthened individuals' actions, whether they are as a policymaker, whether they are as per se individuals, lebih ke situ. Yeah, because like I mentioned in the beginning of my presentations, value can play an important role in, structuring on or menggerakkan bahasa Indonesia, menggerakkan seseorang untuk melakukan sesuatu. So yeah, religion, policymaker of course, and other element of the society should taking care of this. Tapi memang studi kami tidak fokus on the macro level, on the policy makers, but more on individual. Of course, it will be interesting to have like multi-level analysis. How what types of structural conditions beyond the individual characteristic that might contribute to certain behavior and actions.
Going back to this, I'm a bit familiar with East Java. The funny thing, so the waste management is delegated to the lower level of policy making, and you have RT's very, very good self-organization, community-based self-organization, because the RT is very committed and others who don't do so. The structural conditions are there. The Indonesian government allows this type of action, and you see, sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So maybe it's interesting formulation to see what are the conditions. So what makes one RT go into this direction and the other RT in the opposite direction? Personally, I doubt if that would be religion, because both are religious. So there must be other factors involved. But the conditions are there. Your government allows simply to organize that at a decentral level. But why does it happen in one case and not in the other case? Why does the governor of Bali say no plastic bags, no PET bottles anymore in the shops? And why does the governor of Yogyakarta doesn't say that? Yeah, I don't have the answer.
Ya. Oh, Bu Haula atau Pak Didin dulu?
Saya Bu Haula dulu.
Silakan.
Nggak selesai-selesai, senior semua. Okay. Thank you Yani, and thank you to Pak Frans and also Ibu Iing for the presentations. I think your research are complemented each other, and those are really fascinating. For example, like Pak Frans' research, I think basically it's also explained about the conditions on, I think like only on certain condition, the attitude of, the environmentalist attitude is basically emerge among individuals. Like for example, you said those who talk about and discussing about religions a lot in their household environment, they likely to agree to the religious stewards and also humanists. Master, yeah. So it means that on those conditions, and this is also I think aligned with Ibu Iim's research on the behavior, the pro behavior. So my questions is that if religion does matter only in certain conditions on the individual level, so how significant is creating the condition in order to campaigning the pro environmental attitude and also behavior. So we have attitude, we have also behavior. I mean, I don't know whether those who have this pro behavior, does they also have this pro attitude toward the environment or vice versa? Thank you.
Yeah. A very complex question by Bu Haula.
Okay. Creating condition is a quite difficult question, but if I may argue, if I may give an opinion, I think inserting value in form of socialization from the early phase of human lives is important. In the context of religions, we sometimes often emphasis more on apa sih bahasa Inggrisnya ya? Yang permukaan lah, superficials, rather than the substance of the religions. We already know that kebersihan sebagian dari iman. The cleanliness is part of our faith, but in the level of hafalan. But how the implementation? So the socializations of religious values should be, goes directly to the substance rather than on superficial levels. And also, we like Pak Frans mentioned before, ada orang religious gitu ya, tapi prakteknya masih contradiction. Justru Islamicity is more on quote unquote this is just quote unquote secular, but more Islamic rather than the Muslim country which may said should be Islamic. This is like big punch for Muslim countries, I guess. Why should be like this? Berarti kan ada problem di bagaimana mengimplementasikan value, religious value. So I think the socializations from early child is important, and also we need to encourage people to not only focus on kehidupan di akhirat, piety yang sangat, what is that say in English? Kesolehan yang, but social piety. I think we need to emphasize also social piety. That the problem of environment is the problem of the society. Whatever the religions, ya kan? Kalau banjir nggak kenal agama, siapa yang rumahnya tenggelam nggak? Oh, kalau ini Muslim nanti ini enggak, kan semua kena. So, yeah, the disaster did not recognize what your religions. Jadi perlu penekanan social piety. How do we bring religious values more on the substance rather than on superficials? And education is of course important. And I think mainstreaming the issues of religious values that pro to environmental behavior, it should be, you know, we should encourage this to all the religious leaders. Right now we have like Green Islam, but mostly focus more on elites, right? Certain institutions, certain MUI, but how about in the local level? Para penceramah itu, apakah mereka sudah menceramahkan tentang lingkungan? You could check in your mosque whether this Ramadan there will be kultum on environment. Gak ada. So we need to mainstreaming these values, that the issues of religion is not only about salah, but you know, destruction to the environment is also part of your religions. But it's still missing. Kita masih terlalu fokus pada kesolehan, ya vertikal dengan Tuhan saja. How about with the other human, with natures? That's, saya kira itu ya, condition. Kalau everyone sudah pada level itu, saya kira religion could be very powerful in strengthening people's awareness on environments.
Yeah, I fully support this, but another condition that has nothing to do with the Hans scale, that is more my personal hobby. In 2014, I think the Ministry of Environment promoted environment education. I think we know from research that ecological citizenship, when you are an adult, that starts with very small children. That's why in my small yayasan, that's my hobby, I work really with kindergarten. But now I have another project with the UNU in Yogyakarta. Environment education is not a mandatory subject in schools. But there exists not even a book. There is not even a book. So I'm writing a book now with UNU, just a school book. There is no book on environment education. That is strange. Your government already in 2014 announced that this must be part of the education of our children, and it doesn't happen. For whatever reason, I don't know, but so that is also an important condition. Just educate, very small, kindergarten level. That's where the change. We are just the lost generation. We are not going to change our behavior, but those children, they might change their behavior. But yeah, no environment education, not even a book, school book. Very strange for me.
Ya, Pak Didin.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna mix it. Okay, so 2 years ago, I conducted a research on religions of power. The study case was Ummah for Earth. This was the project alliance conducted by Greenpeace Middle East and North Africa, and it has been applied to many non-governmental organizations all around the world, mixed both religious non-governmental organization or secular NGOs, and that includes Greenpeace Indonesia. And it wasn't, I think the moratorium was in 2022. It did not, went well. Like the society did not buy it. The campaign. Greenpeace had they shared their targets, and that didn't meet due to the COVID-19 also, and also the education of the people, like Wu Im said. They had like project
workshopping the ulama to, to disseminate the environmental kultum and so on, but it, still didn't happen. The society has not in that level to apply the environmental behavior, so it didn't go well. Well, your research answered that. How people ask me why was that kenapa determinasi gitu akhirnya ya, why was it terminated the program, and that your research answered that because the religion is only strengthened, but not the main reason. But I'm just gonna add another complexity of this realm. As I'm from international relation studies, when we zoom out, we see also that secular government do not comply to environmental policy too. For example, the failure of Kyoto Protocol was because the U.S. did not ratify that, and that's secular government, So that's that's mixing up. So I'm just gonna share what happened in my head. Well, maybe my question is more likely to Bu Iim. I'm just curious on how social, gender influence this. I mean, I'm curious on the method to how PPIM conclude that gender has, influence in this.
Thank you, Kak Ariana, for the question. Bu Iim or Pak Frans can answer. Oh, Bu Iim first then.
Yeah, I said it already. We didn't find a significant difference between men and women in the way they responded. But that is our finding. I mean, you have possibly a difference.
Yep. So in several literatures, shows usually the tendency that women more eco-friendly, more pro-environmental friendly, and the findings in our study also confirm that. And your question is how we measure. I mentioned before that we measure using pro-environmental behavior questions, but only on the private levels. So like how often they saving the electricity use, like seberapa sering Anda mematikan lampu listrik, penggunaan tablet, plug in your devices, something like that. Seberapa sering, how often you recycling the waste, how often you manage sorting your waste, how often you reuse your plastic bags or you bring your own. So it's more on private level. So our findings only emphasis on private levels. In the literatures, mostly there are differences between men and women in terms of pro-environmental behavior. If they private, they are more likely to be women to be more pro-environmental behavior. But in a public, some studies, we haven't known with our studies right now, but we will follow up with the next survey. Whether also women will be more environmental friendly in a public aspect, in a public level or not. So the explanation why in this finding women are more pro-environmentally friendly, my argument is because of gender socializations. Perempuan selalu disosialisasikan menjaga rumah, menjaga domestic space is women's roles. Buang sampah, matikan lampu, kayaknya kita sudah tersosialisasi baik. So that's why in this finding women are more pro-environmentally behavior.
By the way, that reminds me of a comment that you made in the beginning. It was very good that you mentioned that. The Hans scale is not the very first scale. You mentioned the connected to nature scale. There is the new environmentalism scale, so there are different scales. But all those scales don't measure the full range, and you measure nature-friendly behavior. That might be biased from the very beginning. We think we have the only measure that measures the full range of possible answers, from exploitative to participant. The new environmentalism paradigm doesn't do that. The connectedness to nature doesn't do that. The extended nature in the south scale doesn't do that. So we claim that the Hans scale is the only scale so far that covers the full range of possible relationships to nature. And that makes maybe also a difference why you find more women supporting pro-environment behavior, because that was the focus of your research. That might be a bias in your scale.
Yeah. So in my measurement, it's not asking the support, but their behavior. Not the attitude, whether they are pro-environment, but like the practice, how they're practicing that.
But you measure the support for pro-environment behavior.
Not the support, but their,
But you didn't ask the other options. That is what I want to say. So your
yeah,
scale is
that's
already
yeah,
focused on one
yeah,
option.
yeah.
Whereas our scale is the only scale so far that has the full range.
Yes.
Of possible answers, and that might explain the differences between your findings and our findings.
Yeah. So yeah, it's completely, of course, different. This is not the attitude, but we could also see how the people perception on human and nature impact their behavior, right? But in our survey, this one is missing. For the next survey, we want to see how the correlation between human and nature perceptions of individual, whether this impact to their behavior or not. So in this recent survey, we do not capture human and nature. Yes, it's also the limitation. So that's why for the next project, we want to combine those, how this impact to the others.
We also did not go into the practices, although we asked for the dispositions to behavior, how likely is it that they perform. But if I go to the first Hans scale, that was the Nijmegen project. So we expected massive protests against integral referendum, and that didn't happen. And that shows what we found was in harmony with seemingly the behavior that most people performed at that time, although we did not measure that directly. But yeah, definitely interesting question for future research. And then indeed, if you can manage to include various level of decision making, that is even more interesting, possibly also more complicated.
Ya. Baik, tadi ada tambahan ya bahwa Hans scale ini satu-satunya ya di literatur yang telah dilakukan yang mengcover semua spektrum dalam hubungan antara manusia dengan alam seperti itu. Masih ada pertanyaan lagi? Apakah ada masih pertanyaan? Boleh, ya. Ini pertanyaan terakhir ya Pak.
Mungkin bukan pertanyaan. This is not a question. I just would like to share my own story. I graduated or I finished my study almost from elementary school to higher education from Islamic education. Let's say we call it now is from madrasah, ibtidaiyah, and then to sanawiyah, and then to aliyah, of course with the different name during my time, and I never been introduced to some verses of the Quran, like do not destroy the nature with environmental interpretation. Don't distract, don't destroy don't break the class of the school. That's the interpretation. Don't make the gate doesn't function. Nothing to do with the environment. La tufsidu fil ardi bima kasabat aydihim. What is the complete verses of the Quran? Doharul fasad fil ardi bima kasabat aydihim. All of these verses are not interpreted in the interpretation of the climate change, no environmental. So actually, these verses already been seen from environmental perspective, probably quite new, quite new. If we look at the fatwa of Majelis Ulama, probably that in 2000, if before it happened before, could be like in 1990, when the Minister of Environment, part of the government institutions. So in fact, Majelis Ulama just issued fatwa on the haram of anything action that destroy the planet only in 2023, right? And now announced by Majelis Ulama, passed by Majelis Ulama in 2023, and now start to socialize to the Muslim Ummah. I mean, so it's if we expect religion to have a role, well, if we expect that Islam to play a role, well, Islam has been interpreted not in the spirit of inferentialism, nor in the perspective of climate change yet. When I was in the Islamic school, I was not so educated, socialized to save the energy, to use the panel surya. What panel surya in bahasa Inggris? Solar panel. Nothing with that kind of interpretations. I mean, interpretation is not yet there in the curriculum. In fact, we conducted the study, Islamic higher education, and we found some of the findings. We worked with Ummah for Earth, Greenpeace Indonesia, conducted research for university pada dia, 5 university, and we found nothing in the curriculum on climate change, especially in the perspective of Islam. Well, some science department introduced through their own disciplinary, but then it's not really integrated in the curriculum as integrated, and also integrated also Islamic perspective which is friendly to environment. So I think do we expect too much to Islamic education when in fact climate change and also environmental issue is not yet part of the integrated in the curriculum, even in the formal one, not of course not more even in the daily life of the school, the culture. That's not there yet. I think we should have some space of optimism. If we do more, probably will change the attitude, the behavior. The problem is whether or not the current government or the next government have a political will to do that kind of good things. The second thing I would like to add is that I believe that if we introduce only verses of the Quran, yeah, even in environmental perspective, even if from environmental perspective, if not add or enriched by the science of climate or science environment, does it matter? I'm afraid if all of us introduced to the verses of the Quran, laktub sidu fil ar, even 5 times a day, I don't think that will change our, unless we also exposed to science of environment. For example, destruction, protection of the planet or destruction of the planet, how we explain it? The verses of the Quran doesn't say anything about that. So I think unless the madrasah, UN, and other Islamic institutions also incorporate science, probably will matter for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Didin, for the input. Bu Iim or Pak Frans, would you on the? Oh, okay.
Maybe just two anecdotes. One anecdote I remember very well when we were conducting the research in Citarem, whatever. We had 8 PhD students, and they were supervised by always 2, a Dutch professor and an Indonesian professor from different perspectives, from different disciplines. And that was with ITB and Unpad. And so I mentioned field water engineer, who headscarf, looking at it from an engineering perspective. Very good, excellent. And then after I got some trust and a friendly relationship, and I said, "You're a Muslim, huh?" "Yeah, I'm Muslim." What do you think?" "Oh, don't ask me. No, I have to go to the Gadjah, you know." And the interesting thing, in the Netherlands, most people would say, "I'm religious," but we speak about religion the whole day. I mean, we have very strong opinions against or in favor. But in Indonesia, when you touch religion, no, you have to go to the Gadjah. Hey, come on, you are a learned person, a very high-profile water engineer. I call that secularization. Sometimes I say Indonesia is more secularized than my own country. Because so that is anecdote number 1. Anecdote number 2, I get quite some invitations to speak, particularly from UINs. And there are 2 types of invitations. One type of invitation, people invite me because I speak about environment, so the environment is the topic, and mostly, indeed, not from the Islamic Studies department, but from technical science and technology as well. Secondly, when the invitation is not directed to my field of interest, but to my person, because professor from the Netherlands and so on, ecology is seldom there. I got an invitation just this week from a UIM in a different place. 10 topics, nothing about religion, about ecology. So I said, okay, if you want me to come, you have to put ecology there, otherwise I don't come. But it simply supports your, although UIN speak a lot about integrated science, and but the main topic is religious moderation. You know, I'm always asked to talk about religious moderation, and ecology is simply not part of the agenda. That's my experience.
Thank you. Thank you for the anecdotes that you share with us. And also, we also would like to thank you for the very insightful discussion we have today. We also thank the participants for the active participation from the beginning until the end of our seminar. I will like to close the seminar by saying Alhamdulillah together. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.